The lawyer's office smelled like lemon polish and regret. I could smell it even through the video feed, a scented meticulously encoded into the final recording. My children, my so-called heirs, were arranged before the large monitor, like vultures waiting for a last, dying twitch. They didn't know it was me they were waiting for. They thought I was already ash on the wind. I watched them from my control room, my true masterpiece. Hidden behind what they believed was a wine cellar wall. High-definition screens showed every angle of the library, my old library, where they now sat. Arthur, my eldest, was already red-faced, his jowls quivering with impatience. He'd gained weight since the last time he'd seen him, his expensive suit straining at the buttons. Money well spent, no doubt. My money. Sarah, my daughter, was performing her usual act of strained serenity, but her fingers were a frantic knot in her lap. She kept glancing at her husband, David, a man so blandly avaricious he made wallpaper look exciting. David was subtly checking his Rolex, my Rolex, technically, until the wheel was red. And then there was Elise, the youngest. She was staring out the window, at the grounds Shed loved as a child, looking like Shed rather be anywhere else. Good. Maybe she had a shred of sense left. The lawyer, a pinched little man, Higgins, whom he'd paid handsomely for his discretion and his theatrical timing, cleared his throat. The room snapped to attention. "Thank you for your patience," Higgins began, his voice dry as old parchment. "The last will and testament of Alistair Denisius Finch, known to you all as Get On With It, man," Arthur barked. "We know who he is, was." Higgins didn't flinch. Had been well prepared for their brand of charm. "As I was saying, the will is unorthodox, Mr. Finch left specific instructions that it be delivered via a pre-recorded message." He pressed a button on a remote. The large screen flickered to life, and there I was. I'd taken great care with my final performance. I was seated in my favorite leather wingback chair, the one by the fireplace in the very library they were now in. A glass of my finest Macallan sat, untouched, on the table beside me. I looked gaunt, the cancer having done its cruel work, but my eyes, the famous Finch eyes, sharp and miss-nothing blue, burned with their old fire. "Hello, children," my recorded voice boomed through the room's hidden speakers. I saw Sarah jump. David's eyes narrowed. Arthur's scowl deepened. Elise finally turned from the window, her expression unreadable. "If you're seeing this, then I am, thankfully, departed. No more tedious visits where you all stare at me like I'm a disappointing stock portfolio that's refusing to die on schedule. No more of Sarah's inedible casseroles for the freezer, which I'm fairly certain were just reheated from your own. No more of Arthur's loud, unsolicited advice on how I should be running my own affairs. And David, well, your silent, calculating presence was its own special torture. Elise, you stopped coming. I suppose that was its own message." I paused, letting the venom settle. It was a delight to watch their faces. Arthur was puce. Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. "You are here for the reading of my will, the division of my life's work, my estate, my companies, my investments, this house, and every single object within it. The total value is considerable, more than considerable, and not a single cent of it is yours." The room erupted. "He can't do that," Arthur roared, surging to his feet. "This is outrageous," David hissed, his bland mask finally cracking. "Quiet," Higgins commanded, his voice surprisingly firm. "The recording is not yet complete. There are conditions. On screen." I took a slow, deliberate sip of the whiskey. A final, fictional taste. Theatricality was key. I said. My image continued. "It is not yours. Not yet. You see, I have spent the last 82 years building something. A legacy, not just of wealth, but of principle, of values. Things you lot have treated with the same reverence a warthog shows a truffle. You see dollar signs. I see the sweat of my brow, the brilliance of my mind, the love of my life, your mother, whom you rarely mention, and the history of this family." I leaned forward, the camera zooming in slightly on my face. "You believe you are entitled to this legacy simply by virtue of your bloodline, a notion so profoundly lazy and insulting it makes my bones ache. So, I have decided to let you earn it. A soft, simultaneous click echoed through the library. The heavy oak doors swung shut of their own accord. A series of louder, solid thunks indicated the bolt stick, custom-made steel bolts it had installed slamming home. "What is this?" Sarah whispered, a note of genuine fear in her voice. "What's happening?" David said, rushing to the door. He tugged on the handle. It didn't budge. "You are now in what I like to call the inheritance escape room," my voice continued, a note of profound satisfaction in my tone. "This entire house is the venue. Your inheritance is the prize. To claim it, you must escape. Or, more precisely, you must solve your way to the final repository of my wealth." Arthur was pounding on the door now. "Higgins, open this damn door. This is illegal. I'll sue. I'll have you disbarred." Higgins remained impassive. "My role was to deliver the message and ensure you were all present. My duties are now complete. The rest is between you and your father's design." He walked to a section of the bookcase, pressed a hidden panel, and a door he'd built just for this moment swung open. He slipped through it and was gone. The panel clicked shut, leaving them truly alone. Panic began to set in. Real, delicious panic. "The rules are simple," I said from the screen. They turned back to me, their faces a portrait of shock and dawning horror. "You must work together. The puzzles are based on our family's history, on the values I hold dear, on the memories you've clearly forgotten in your rush to get your hands on my money. Succeed, and the estate will be divided in the manner I have deemed fair. Fail, I let the word hang in the air. Fail, and every last asset, every stock, every property, every painting, will be immediately liquidated and donated to the Society for the Preservation of Antiquated Books, a charity you have all, at various times, mocked me for supporting. You will get nothing, not a single paperclip. Hayes insane." Arthur screamed at the screen. The cancer rotted his brain. "OH, I can hear you, Arthur," my recording said. He froze. It anticipated his reactions perfectly. "The house hears you. I hear you. There are microphones and cameras everywhere. So, mind your language. And mind your attitude. The first puzzle is right in front of you. It is a test of the most basic value this family was built upon: observation." The screen went black. For a moment, there was silence. Then chaos. Cameras. Everywhere. Sarah shrieked, pulling her cardigan tightly around herself. David was already scanning the room, his eyes darting across the shelves, the furniture, the fixtures. He said, "The first puzzle is right in front of us. Observation. Look for something out of place, something that doesn't belong." "I don't see anything," Arthur bellowed, stomping around the room. "It's just his stupid books and junk." He swept a hand across a shelf, sending a first edition of Melville crashing to the floor. In my control room, I winced. That one hurt. But it was a necessary sacrifice. His brutishness was playing right into my hands. Elise, who had been silent throughout, walked over to the fallen book. She knelt and picked it up, gently smoothing the pages. "This was one of Mom's favorites," she said quietly. "Who cares?" Arthur snapped. "We're not here for a trip down memory lane. We're here to get what's ours." "It's not ours, Arthur," Elise said, her voice still soft but with a new edge. "He made that very clear. We have to earn it. And you just vandalized a probably priceless book." "I doubt that's what he meant by observation." "She's right," David said, ever the pragmatist. "Destroying his property is counterproductive. We need to think. What did he mean? Observation. Look around. What's different?" They began to pace, to peer at shelves. They were looking for something complex, a hidden lever, a mysterious box. They were overcomplicating it. The answer was infuriatingly simple. It was Sarah who finally saw it. "The portrait," she said, pointing a trembling finger above the fireplace. It was a large painting of my father, their grandfather, a stern industrialist who had built the foundation of our fortune. He was depicted in his workshop, a half-assembled engine on the bench before him. "What about it?" Arthur grumbled. Hayes not wearing his watch." We all stared. My father was never, ever without his old Hamilton watch. It was his trademark. In every other photo and painting, it was on his wrist, In this one, his wrist was bare. The watch is the key, David said, a spark of excitement in his eyes. It must be hidden somewhere in this room. They began a frantic search, pulling books off shelves, lifting ornaments, rifling through drawers. It was Elise, again, who applied a modicum of sense. She walked right up to the painting and looked closely at the canvas itself. "The watch is there," she said. "He's wearing it." We crowded around. She was right. On the wrist of the man in the painting, tucked slightly behind a wrench, was a tiny, meticulously painted watch. But it wasn't the Hamilton. It was a cheap, garish, bright red digital watch. A child's toy. It was absurdly, blatantly out of place. "What the hell is that?" Arthur said. "It's my watch," Elise said, her voice barely a whisper. A faint smile touched her lips. "The one he bought me at the county fair when I was 8. I left it here that summer. He must have kept it." "Sentimental rubbish," Arthur spat. "What does it mean?" "The time," David said, snapping his fingers. "Look at the time on the watch." The digital display on the painted watch read 7:30. 7:30, Sarah said. "But is that AM or PM?" "It doesn't matter," David said, his mind racing. "A time. A clock. There's the grandfather clock." He pointed to the great oak clock in the corner. They rushed to it. Arthur yanked open the glass door on the clock face. Nothing. David felt around the body for a hidden compartment. "The time is wrong," Elise observed. The hands on the clock face showed 4:15, so we set it to 7:30, Arthur said, grabbing the minute hand and forcing it forward. The mechanism groaned in protest. "Don't," Elise cried, but it was too late. As he moved the hand past the 6, there was a sharp, sickening crack from inside the clock. A sound of breaking gears. Arthur jumped back. A small drawer they had missed, near the base of the clock, sprung open, but instead of a key or a clue, a small piece of paper fluttered out. David snatched it up. His face fell. "What?" Sarah asked. "What does it say?" He held it up. In my precise, spidery handwriting, it read, "Impatience is the costliest of vices. You break what you seek to claim. A lesson you have yet to learn. Penalty. 1 hour is added to your time." A loud, mechanical clunk echoed from the front door. "What was that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I think," David said, his face pale, "I think he just locked us in for an extra hour." "This is impossible," Arthur roared. "Hayes toying with us." "No," Elise said, looking from the broken clock to the painting. "Hayes teaching us, or testing us. We have to be careful. We have to think." "The watch," I said from the screen, making them all jump. My image had reappeared. The watch was the clue. The time was the key. But the key wasn't to force the clock, you imbecile. The key was to understand its meaning. -1:30. Not a time on the clock. A time of day. A specific, cherished time in this house. Think, when was 7:30 important? They were silent. Blank faces. The ignorance was staggering. "Breakfast," my recorded voice prompted, dripping with contempt. -1:30 a.m. sharp. Every morning of your childhoods. Your mother insisted on it. "The family that eats together," she would say. "And in the center of that table the fruit bowl," Elise said, her eyes widening. The silver fruit bowl. They practically fell over each other rushing to the dining room. The great mahogany table was pristine, empty save for the centerpiece, a large, ornate silver bowl filled with realistic wax fruit. Arthur grabbed the bowl and appended it, sending fake apples and bananas clattering across the polished wood. "Nothing. It's just a bowl," he yelled in frustration. "Wait," David said, picking it up. He ran his fingers over the intricate engravings around the base. "There's writing here." It's not English." Sarah took it from him. "It's Latin. Non mihi, non tibi, sed nobis." "What does it mean?" Arthur demanded. "Not for you, not for me, but for us," Elise translated softly. "For us, for the family," Sarah said. As she said the word family, there was a soft click from within the bowl. The base, a separate plate, loosened. David pried it off. Inside the hollow base was not a key, but a small, old-fashioned metal puzzle, a tangled ring of interlocked pieces. A puzzle. Arthur scoffed. He gives us a puzzle to solve a puzzle. It's a wedding ring puzzle, Elise said, taking it from him. Mom and Dad had one on their mantle 4 years. You have to separate the 2 rings. She sat down at the table and began to work at it, her fingers nimble and patient. Arthur paced like a caged bull. David watched her, his analytical mind trying to see the solution. Sarah wrung her hands. Hurry up, Arthur muttered. Elise ignored him, twisting and turning the stubborn pieces of metal. After a few minutes, there was a final, satisfying click. The 2 rings came apart, and etched on the inside of one of them was a single word, perseverance. As she read the word aloud, a panel on the wall beside the sideboard slid open with a quiet hiss. It revealed not an exit, but a narrow, dark passageway leading downward. A faint, damp smell wafted out. A secret passage, David whispered, a gleam of avaricious curiosity in his eyes. I never knew. Of course you didn't, my voice said from a hidden speaker in the dining room corner. They flinched. You never looked. You never asked. You were only ever interested in what was on the surface. The first virtue, perseverance. You have remembered, briefly, what it means to see a task through without brute force. A small step. The path forward is below. Mind your step. The next test awaits. Arthur, emboldened, pushed to the front and peered into the darkness. It's a cellar. Probably leads to the wine cellar. I knew it. The old man's fortune is down there with his precious bottles. He pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight, and plunged in without a second thought. David, after a moment's hesitation, followed. Sarah looked terrified. I don't like this, she whispered. We don't have a choice, Elise said, taking her hand. Come on. I watched them disappear into the passage, the panel sliding shut behind them. I leaned back in my chair in the control room, a slow smile spreading across my face. The game was afoot. The stairs were steep and narrow, worn smooth by time. They descended into a cold, earthy darkness that seemed to swallow the light from Arthur's phone. This isn't the wine cellar, David said, his voice echoing slightly. The wine cellar is off the kitchen. This is older. The stairs ended in a rough-hewn stone corridor. It was cold, and the air was thick with the smell of wet stone and old earth. It felt ancient, a part of the house's bones that had been long forgotten. What is this place? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. It's the original foundation, Elise said, running a hand over the damp wall. The house was built over it. Grandpa Deny told me stories about it. He said his father used it as a workshop during Prohibition. Said he was a terrible bootlegger. A criminal. How fitting, Arthur muttered, shining his light down the corridor. It ended at a heavy, iron-bound wooden door. Set into the door was not a handle, but a large, complex brass mechanism. It looked like a cross between an astrolabe and a clock, with concentric rings marked with symbols, numbers, and letters. Another damned puzzle, Arthur groaned. David stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with the challenge. This is more like it. A proper lock. He began examining the device, tracing the symbols with his finger. Astrological signs, Roman numerals, Greek letters, it's a cipher lock. What's the combination? Sarah asked, her voice hopeful. We have to figure it out, David said. He wouldn't just give it to us. The clue must be back in the library, or the dining room. We missed something. We're not going back up those stairs, Arthur said, giving the door a solid kick. It didn't budge. There has to be another way. While the two men argued, Elise stood back, looking at the door as a whole. Her light played over the wood, the ironwork, the mechanism. Then she saw it. Carved into the lintel above the door, almost worn away by time, was a phrase. Paraspera ad ostra. She read aloud. What does that mean? Arthur snapped. Through hardships to the stars. David translated absently, still fiddling with the rings. Stars, Elise murmured. She looked back at the mechanism. The outermost ring had astrological signs. Through hardships to the stars. Maybe it's a date. A birthday. Mom's. Dad's. Father's birthday is June 21st, Sarah offered. That's Cancer. David spun the ring to align the crab symbol with a fixed marker on the door. Nothing happened. Try Moms, Elise said. October 5th. Libra. He spun it to the scales. Again, nothing. Their wedding anniversary. Sarah suggested. May 15th. Taurus. The ball. Nothing. This is useless. Arthur yelled, his frustration boiling over. It could be anything. The day he made his first million. The day his stupid dog died. The hardships, Elise said quietly, thinking. Per aspera. What were the hardships? The family's hardships. The fire, Sarah said suddenly. The fire in the old factory. Grandpa's factory. It almost bankrupted them. When was that? David asked, his head snapping up. I don't remember the exact date, Sarah admitted. I was little. It was all anyone talked about for a year. Father had to rebuild everything from scratch. He wouldn't use that, Arthur said dismissively. A failure. No, Elise countered. He would. He always said that fire was the best thing that ever happened to him. It forced him to innovate, to persevere. It was the making of him. Through hardships. But we don't know the date. Arthur argued. We can find it, David said. A new energy in his voice. He would have left a record. A clue. It has to be back in the library. The thought of the long climb back up the narrow stairs was demoralizing, but they had no choice. They trudged back up, emerging into the bright warmth of the dining room. It felt like a different world. They fanned out in the library, this time looking for something related to the factory, to the fire. They pulled down books on industrial history, company ledgers I kept on the shelves for posterity. Nothing. Arthur, in his rage, swept a whole section of books from a lower shelf. And there, behind them, carved into the wooden back panel of the bookcase, was a simple date. October 29th, 62. There, he shouted triumphantly. That's it. It has to be. They rushed back down into the cold passage, Arthur nearly slipping on the worn steps in his haste. October 29th, 1962, David said, his hands hovering over the mechanism. So the astrological sign for late October is Scorpio. He spun the outer ring until the scorpion symbol clicked into place. A faint, deep whirring sound came from within the door, but it didn't open. The next ring, Elise said. Roman numerals. The year, 1962. Mukmuk-C. David carefully aligned the rings. M, C, M, L, X, I. Another, louder clunk echoed from within the heavy door. Now the inner ring, David said, his voice tight with excitement. Greek letters. What could that be? The day, Sarah suggested. The 29th. But there's no Greek letter for 29. The name of the factory, Arthur said. Finch Industries. That's not Greek. Adostra, Elise whispered. To the stars. Not the astrological stars. The actual stars. She looked at David. The Greek letters are used to designate the brightest stars in a constellation. For Scorpio, the brightest star is Antares. Its Greek designation is Alpha Scorpii. David's eyes widened. He turned the innermost ring until the letter Alpha was aligned. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, with a great groaning of ancient gears and the screech of metal that hadn't moved in half a century, the massive door began to swing inward, slowly, heavily. Arthur didn't wait. He shoved it open the rest of the way and barged through, David on his heels. The room beyond was not a treasure vault. It was a reconstruction of my father's old workshop, exactly as it had been on the night of the fire. The walls were charred and soot-stained. Workbenches were covered in half-melted tools and the scorched skeletons of mechanical parts. In the center of the room stood a large, blackened safe, its door hanging slightly ajar, and scrawled across the wall in white paint, in my unmistakable handwriting, was a single, pointed question. What was saved? Arthur made a beeline for the safe. This is it. It's in here. He yanked the heavy door open. Inside was not gold or bonds, but a single, fire-warped photograph in a melted frame. It was a picture of my mother, my father, and me as a young boy, standing in front of the original factory. The glass was cracked and smoky. Sentimental junk, Arthur roared, throwing the photograph across the room. It shattered against the wall. Where's the money? Arthur, Elise cried, rushing to pick up the pieces. The question isn't what was in the safe, David said, his shoulders slumping in defeat as he looked around the ruined workshop. The question is what was saved. From the fire. Who cares? Arthur bellowed. It was 60 years ago. He cares, Elise said, cradling the broken photo. This was all he cared about. The photo. His family. This is what he saved. As she said the word, a small drawer on one of the soot-covered workbenches popped open with a ping. Inside was not a key, but a small, old-fashioned tape recorder. Arthur snatched it up and pressed play. My voice, younger, but no less stern, filled the room. It was a recording he'd made for myself after the fire. The insurance assessors asked me what I would save if I could only save one thing, the recording said. They expected me to say the prototype for the deny-snap coupling, the thing that would have made us millions. But I didn't. I told them I'd already saved the only thing that mattered, the photograph of my family on the day we opened the doors. They laughed. They called me a fool. But a man who knows what he truly values is never a fool. The coupling was insured. My family was not. The recording ended with a soft click. Value. My present-day voice said from a speaker hidden somewhere in the room. The air spun around. You seek what you value, money. But you have just destroyed the one object I valued above all else at that time. You see a worthless picture. I see my life. Arthur stared at the broken glass in Elise's hands, a flicker of something shame, perhaps crossing his face before it was buried under renewed anger. A lesson in value, my voice continued. You have failed it. Miserably. Penalty. The next room will be considerably less hospitable. Before they could react, the heavy iron door slammed shut behind them, the locks grinding home with terrifying finality. At the same time, a section of the opposite wall slid away, revealing not another passage, but the entrance to an old, wrought-iron elevator cage. Its gate was open, waiting. But from the darkness of the elevator shaft, a low, mechanical grinding began to sound, and with a jolt, the entire room, the floor, the walls, the ceiling began to vibrate. Sarah screamed. What's that noise? A fine spray of dust rained down from the ceiling. The grinding grew louder, more menacing. David's face went white. It's not a noise, he said, his voice hollow with dawning horror. It's a mechanism. The room he didn't need to finish. We all understood. The walls, charred and ancient, began to tremble. The floor beneath our feet gave a sickening lurch. The room was moving. We were trapped in a box, and the box was beginning to descend. The grinding was a living thing, a deep, metallic roar that vibrated up through the soreness of our shoes and into our bones. The entire workshop shuddered, and a shower of dust and ancient plaster rained down from the ceiling. Sarah let out a short, sharp scream, quickly stifled by her own hand. What did you do? David shouted at Arthur, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. I didn't do anything. Arthur roared back, bracing himself against a wobbling workbench. It's the old man's doing. He's trying to bury us alive. The floor lurched again, a sickening downward drop that sent us all stumbling. The sensation was unmistakable now. We weren't just in a room, we were in an elevator car disguised as a room, and it was descending rapidly into the bowels of the earth. The single bare bulb hanging from a wire flickered violently, casting frantic, jumping shadows across the terrified faces of my children. Elise was the only one who seemed to have kept her head. She had tucked the shattered remnants of the photograph into her jacket pocket and was now scanning the walls, her eyes wide, but focused. There has to be a way to stop it, or a clue to what's next. What's next is, we're all going to be crushed into paste. Arthur yelled, panic finally overriding his anger. He rushed to the iron door and threw his shoulder against it. It was like trying to budge a mountain. The door that had swung open so dramatically was now sealed tight, a seamless part of the shuddering wall. The descent seemed to go on forever, the grinding gears a soundtrack to our collective terror. I watched them from my control room, my fingers steepled under my chin. The workshop elevator had been my most ambitious modification to the house, a feat of engineering that had cost a fortune and required the silence of contractors who were very well paid for their discretion. The look on their faces was worth every penny. Finally, with a jarring crash that sent us all to our knees. The movement stopped. The sudden silence was more deafening than the noise had been. For a long moment, no one moved. We just stayed there, kneeling on the cold, stone-dusted floor, breathing in the smell of our own fear and ancient mildew. The single light bulb flickered once, twice, and then went out, plunging us into absolute, suffocating blackness. Sarah whimpered. Arthur cursed, a long, inventive stream of profanity that echoed in the dark. "Everyone, stay still." David's voice cut through the panic, surprisingly calm. "Don't move. We don't know what's in here." The sound of fabric rustling, then a click, and a bright beam of light pierced the darkness. David had his phone out, the flashlight function on. He swept the beam around the room. It was exactly as it had been, but the door we'd entered was gone, replaced by solid, rough-hewn rock. We were in a perfect, terrifying prison. "Over there," Elise said, her voice shaky but clear. She pointed to the far wall, the one that had revealed the elevator. The elevator gate was still there, but beyond it was no longer a shaft. It was another room, visible through the iron bars. David's light beam traveled across the bars and illuminated the space beyond. It was a small, square chamber, maybe 10 by 10 feet. The walls, floor, and ceiling were made of gleaming white tile, like an old-fashioned asylum bathroom. In the center of the floor was a large, rusty iron drain, and set into the far wall was another massive door, this one made of riveted steel, like the door to a vault or a submarine. But the most horrifying thing was what was happening to the floor. Even as we watched, a jet of water shot from a pipe near the ceiling, arcing down to splash onto the tiles. Then another, and another. A dozen pipes, positioned around the room, began to gush cold, clear water. It was already ankle-deep and rising fast. "My God," Sarah whispered. "He's going to drown us." "No," David said, his analytical mind fighting through the fear. "No, it's another puzzle. It has to be. He wants us to get to that door." He shone his light on the vault door. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a large, spoked wheel in the center, like something on a ship, and above the wheel, set into the steel, was a digital countdown timer, currently blank. "How?" Arthur demanded, his voice cracking. "How do we get there?" "We're in here. That's in there." He rattled the elevator gate. It was solid, locked. Elise joined him at the gate, running her hands over the bars, the frame. "There has to be a release." Another puzzle here. Her light joined David's, scanning the perimeter of our prison. My voice, amplified and eerily calm, echoed from a hidden speaker, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The value of preparation," I intoned. "A man who fails to plan, plans to fail." I did not build my empire by reacting to crises. I built it by anticipating them. This room is a crisis. Your escape requires preparation. Look to the tools you have ignored. The recording ended. The only sound was the relentless, splashing gush of water. It was already halfway up the tile room, swirling around the drain. "Tools," Arthur said, spinning around, shining his own phone light frantically over the scorched workbenches. "What tools? It's all burned junk." But David wasn't looking at the benches. He was looking at the safe. The door was still hanging open from Arthur's earlier assault. He strode over to it and shoved his arm inside, feeling around the empty interior. "There's nothing in there," Arthur snapped. "I already checked." David ignored him, his brow furrowed in concentration. The recording was from after the fire. He said the assessors asked him what head safe. But the safe is from before the fire. It was in the workshop. He'd have had tools for it. He started running his hands over the outside of the safe, around the hinge mechanism, the dial. Elise understood first. She rushed to the workbench where the tape recorder had been. She picked it up, turned it over. It was a solid, heavy piece of 1960s technology. She pressed every button, twisted every knob. Nothing happened. "The tape," she said. He said, "Look to the tools you have ignored. The message is the tool." She rewound the tape and played it again. We all listened, straining to hear over the sound of the water, which was now chest high in the other room. The insurance assessors asked me what I would save. If I could only save one thing, it's the same thing. Arthur yelled. We already heard it. I told them I'd already saved the only thing that mattered. The photograph is destroyed. Sarah wailed. The coupling was insured. My family was not. The recording ended. Elise played it again and again. On the third listen, David held up a hand. Stop. There. At the end. After he says was not. There's a click. But it's not the recorder stopping. It's too sharp. Elise rewound a few seconds and turned the volume all the way up. She held the speaker close to her ear. Was not. There was a definite, metallic click embedded in the recording, separate from the sound of the tape. A switch. David murmured. A trigger. He took the recorder from her and held it up to the safe. He played the last second of the tape. The word not and the subsequent click, right next to the safe's combination dial. Nothing happened. The water in the next room was now neck-high, lapping against the vault door. The countdown timer above the wheel suddenly flickered to life, displaying 5 o'clock. 5 minutes. Pressure, Elise said suddenly, her eyes wide. The water pressure. The drain. He said the tools you have ignored. The drain in the other room is a tool. The water has to reach a certain level to activate something. But we're not in the water room, Arthur screamed, his frustration reaching a fever pitch. We're in here. David was staring at the safe, a dawning look of understanding on his face. The click, it's not for the safe. The safe is a red herring. It's already open. It's been used. He already saved what was inside. He looked at Elise. The click is a key. A sonic key. It has to be used on the lock that's still engaged. His beam of light shot across our cell, past the gate, through the rising water, and landed on the vault door. The wheel was still locked fast. We have to get the recorder over there, he said. We have to play the click next to that door. How? Sarah cried. The water in the tile room was almost to the ceiling now. Only a few inches of air remaining. The vault door would be completely submerged in seconds. The countdown read for 30. The gate, Elise said, running her hands over the elevator gate's locking mechanism. It was a heavy, old-fashioned bolt lock, but it was electronic, not mechanical. There was a keyhole, but no key, and next to the keyhole was a small, blank digital screen. It needs a code, she said. A code from what? Arthur demanded, grabbing the bars and shaking them with all his might. They didn't give an inch. David was back at the workbench, frantically shoving aside melted tools, his light darting everywhere. The value of preparation. He anticipated the fire. What did he have? What did he always have? He stopped. His light settled on an object half hidden under a pile of child rags. It was a fire extinguisher, an ancient, chrome-bodied model, the kind with a glass vial of chemical inside. It was pristine, untouched by the fire. He grabbed it. It was heavy. This is it. He was prepared for a fire. This is the tool. He brought it over to the gate. There was no obvious place to use it. He tried to smash the lock with it. The chrome bell rang loudly, but the lock held. The screen, Elise said, pointing at the blank digital display. Maybe it needs a number. The date. The fire date. October 29, 62. Arthur punched the numbers into the phone he was still holding, as if trying to dial them. There's no keypad. David looked at the extinguisher, then at the screen. He turned the extinguisher over. Stamped on the bottom was a serial number. F7 to 91. Try that, he yelled. 7-to-9-1. Arthur looked around wildly for a keypad that didn't exist. Elise was feeling around the frame of the gate, her fingers searching for a hidden input. The water in the tile room had reached the ceiling. The jets were still pumping, the room now completely full, the water dark and terrifyingly still. The countdown timer glowed eerily through the water. 3:15. The vault door was submerged. We'd never get the recorder to it in time. The number isn't for a keypad, David shouted, his composure finally breaking. It's for the screen. It's a frequency, a wavelength. 7-to-9-1 watt. Hertz, Elise said, her voice desperate. Kilocycles. It's too vague. The countdown ticked to 3 o'clock. And then I saw it. Arthur, in his panicked fumbling, had dropped his phone. It clattered to the floor, its light shining up onto the underside of the gate's locking mechanism. And there, hidden in the shadow of a crossbar, was a small, almost invisible numerical dial. It was set to 0. There, I yelled, the word torn from me. I couldn't help it. Their incompetence was too frustrating to watch. I was supposed to be a silent observer, but the game was losing its entertainment value. They all spun to look at me, shocked that I had spoken live, not from a recording. Elise dropped to her knees and scrambled for the dial. She spun it. 7291. She clicked it to the final digit. Nothing happened. The countdown hit to 45. The extinguisher. David yelled, the idea striking him. It's not the number. It's the tool itself. It's a key. He shoved the neck of the extinguisher at the keyhole next to the screen. It didn't fit. He tried the base. Nothing. The vial, Elise said. The glass vial inside. It was a long shot. A desperate, crazy long shot. David unscrewed the top of the extinguisher. Inside was the sealed glass vial of sulfuric acid. He pulled it out. It was long, thin, and tapered. With trembling hands, he inserted the thin end of the glass vial into the keyhole. It fit. He turned it. A green light flashed on the digital screen. With a loud buzz, the electronic bolt on the gate retracted. Yes, Arthur roared, yanking the gate open. But the tile room was a solid block of water. There was no air left. The vault door was under 3 feet of water. The recorder, David shouted, thrusting the tape player into Arthur's hands. You have to get it to the door. Play the click. I can't hold my breath for 3 minutes. Arthur protested, staring at the water in horror. You have to try. Elise screamed. The countdown was at 2 o'clock. No, David said, a strange look on his face. He was looking at the fire extinguisher. The value of preparation. He was prepared for a fire, but he was also prepared for the aftermath. He pointed to the wording on the extinguisher's body. Pyro be gone. Contains compressed oxygen for rebreathing in smoke-filled environments. It wasn't just a fire extinguisher. It was an emergency respirator. Arthur didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the extinguisher, put the mouthpiece to his lips, and took a deep, experimental breath. He gave a thumbs up. His eyes were wide with fear, but a grim determination was there too. The promise of money was a powerful motivator. He took the tape recorder in his other hand, drew a last big breath from the extinguisher, and plunged into the icy water. We watched from the gate, our lights following his form as he kicked through the dark water towards the vault door. The countdown glowed. 1:30. He reached the door, fumbling with the recorder. He found the play button, held the speaker against the metal near the wheel. We saw his cheeks puff out, saw the bubbles escape his lips. He was running out of air. He pressed play. We couldn't hear it, but we saw it. The moment the hidden click on the tape was triggered, the large, spoked wheel on the vault door jerked, then began to spin freely. Arthur dropped the recorder. It floated away into the dark water. He grabbed the wheel with both hands and twisted. With a great groan that we could feel through the water, the door began to swing inward. A torrent of water rushed through the opening, pulling Arthur with it. The pressure in the tile room equalized in a violent surge. The water level in our elevator cell began to drop rapidly as it drained into whatever space lay beyond the vault door. In less than a minute, the tile room was empty, the water swirling down the large drain in the center of the floor. Arthur was lying on his back, coughing and spluttering in a sopping wet corridor, the vault door hanging open behind him. The countdown timer had frozen at 0:47. We wasted no time. We sloshed through the ankle-deep water left in the tile room and stumbled through the vault door into the corridor beyond. It was cold and smelled of damp concrete and ozone. The walls were lined with thick electrical conduits and modern piping. We were in a utility corridor, part of the house's modern infrastructure. The vault door swung shut behind us with a final, echoing boom, sealing off the nightmare room. For a moment, we just stood there, dripping and gasping, the adrenaline making our hands shake. Arthur lay on the floor, still breathing in ragged gulps, Sarah started to cry. Great heaving sobs of relief and terror. David leaned against the wall, his eyes closed, his face pale. Elise walked over to Arthur and offered him a hand. He looked at it for a moment. Then, to my immense surprise, he took it and let her help him up. The value of preparation, my voice said. This time, it came from a small intercom grill on the wall. They all flinched, but the hysterical panic was gone, replaced by a weary tension. You utilized the tools at hand. You understood that the past provides the key to the future, and you worked, however clumsily, as a unit. A marginal pass. A section of the corridor wall slid open, revealing a small, dark space. Inside, on a simple wooden pedestal, sat 4 small glasses and a bottle of my best brandy. A note was tucked under the bottle. Elise took it and read it aloud, her voice tired but clear. To calm the nerves. The next room requires a steady hand. You will need it. Arthur snatched the bottle, uncorked it, and took a long, deep swig directly from the neck. He then poured a generous measure into a glass and thrust it at Sarah, who took it with trembling hands. David took one for himself. Elise declined, still looking at the note. A steady hand for what? She murmured. The brandy was gone in minutes. The simple, warming alcohol did its work. The shaking stopped. The panic receded, replaced by a grim, determined exhaustion. The cheap trick with the liquor had worked exactly as I'd planned. It made them feel like they'd been given a reward, a moment of respite, and it bonded them slightly. It made them trust the process, just a little bit. They were like lab rats pressing a lever for a pellet. The corridor ended at another door. This one was unassuming, just a normal, painted wooden door. There was no lock, no puzzle mechanism visible. David turned the handle. It opened easily. The room beyond was a shock to the system. After the darkness and damp of the workshop and the utility corridor, this space was bright, warm, and humid. It was my greenhouse, or a perfect replica of it. The air was thick with the smell of rich earth and blooming flowers. The ceiling was glass, showing a false night sky twinkling with impossibly bright stars. Lush plants grew in orderly rows, and in the center of the room was a large, marble-top table. On the table was an object that made my blood run cold, even though I had put it there myself. It was a scale model of our family home, exquisitely detailed, perfect down to the tiny shingles on the roof and the lilac bushes by the porch. It was the house as it had been when they were all children, whole and happy, and it was wired with dozens of slender, colorful sticks of dynamite. The brandy's warmth was a lie. It burned in my stomach, a small, false sun against the cold dread that had taken root there. The greenhouse was a beautiful trap. The air was heavy, perfumed with night-blooming jasmine and the damp, honest scent of soil. It was my wife's sanctuary, the one place in the house her spirit had felt truly free, and he had defiled it. The model house sat on the marble table like a diorama of a perfect life, a life that had never really existed. The dynamite was obscene, the colorful wire snaking from the explosive sticks to a complex-looking timer unit were a violent splash of graffiti on a cherished memory. The timer was already counting down from 15 o'clock, 14 minutes and 59 seconds, 14:58. No, Sarah whispered, the sound a puff of air. She took a stumbling step backward, her hand flying to her mouth. He wouldn't. He couldn't. He would, Arthur said. His voice flat, all the brandy-induced color drained from his face. He took a step closer, his eyes wide, not with fear now, but with a kind of horrific fascination. He absolutely would. Hayes insane. This proves it. David was already at the table, his hands hovering over the model, not touching, his eyes tracing the wires. It's not real. It can't be real. The blast would level this wing of the house. He wouldn't risk his precious. His words died as his eyes fell on a small, clear box attached to the side of the timer. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a single, unmistakable object, a blasting cap. It's real, David breathed. The clinical detachment's head maintained finally cracked. A fine sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. The explosives are live. The cap is primed. The timer ticked to 14:30. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. This wasn't a lesson. This was murder. My own father was going to kill us in a shrine he'd built to our dead mother. The poetry of it was so cruel, so perfectly him, that I felt vomit rise in my throat. How do we stop it? Elise's voice was calm, but it was the calm of a bowstring pulled taut. She was looking not at the bomb, but at the room around us. He said it requires a steady hand. And this is Mom's place. There has to be a clue here. A clue. Arthur shrieked, rounding on her. There's a bomb, Elise. We don't need a clue. We need a pair of goddamn wire cutters. He began yanking open the drawers built into the base of the marble table. They were filled with gardening tools, trowels, shears, packets of seeds. No wire cutters. 13 to 45. The wires are a red herring, David said, his voice tight. He was pointing at the timer unit. It wasn't a standard digital clock. It had a small, black and white screen above the numbers, and below that, a keypad with letters as well as numbers. It's not about cutting the right wire. It's a computer. It needs a code to disarm it. A code from what? Sarah moaned, sinking onto a nearby wrought iron bench. She was shutting down. I could see it. The light behind her eyes was retreating, going somewhere safe. From her, Elise said softly. She was standing by a trellis of white roses, her fingers gently touching a bloom. It has to be. Everything in this room is her. My voice, that hated, omnipresent voice, boomed from a speaker hidden among the vines. The heart of the home, I said. The recording had a softer quality here, almost wistful. Your mother was the heart. She nurtured. She protected. She made things grow. You, most of all. But you forgot that. You saw her as an accessory, a pleasant background character in the story of your own ambition. You forgot her sacrifices, her joys, her quiet strength. To still the destructive force before you, you must remember the heart. You must input the key that unlocked her world. The message ended. The only sound was the relentless ticking of the timer. 12 to 10. The key that unlocked her world, Arthur parroted, his face a mask of confusion and rage. What does that mean? A literal key. He started rifling through the plants, overturning pots, digging his hands into the soil. It has to be buried here somewhere. Stop it, Elise shouted, her calm finally breaking. She rushed over and grabbed his arm. You're destroying her things. That's not the answer. Then what is? He yelled back, shaking her off. Her world was this garden. What's the key? A fertilizer recipe. A fucking watering schedule. Her world was us, I said. The words surprising me. They were out before I could stop them. David and Arthur turned to stare at me. Sarah didn't look up from the floor. Her world was her family. That's what he means. So a family password, David said, turning back to the keypad. A birthday, an anniversary. We've tried those. No, Elise said, her eyes scanning the room, seeing it not as a trap, but as a place she'd once loved. Not a date. A key that unlocked her world. Something that started it. Or something that made her happy. Her gaze landed on a small, hand-painted ceramic plaque hanging near the door. It was a quote from Voltaire that my mother had loved. I have decided to be happy because it is good for my health. Happiness, she murmured. What made her happy? Music, Sarah said, her voice a hollow whisper from the bench. We all looked at her. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just staring into the middle distance, lost in a memory. She was always singing. In the kitchen, in the garden. All just standards. She had a terrible voice, but she loved it. A song title, David said, his fingers poised over the keypad. What was her favorite? I don't know, Sarah said. And the simple admission seemed to cause her physical pain. I never asked. 10:15. The bomb seemed to grow larger on the table, the timer's numbers burning into my retinas. Not a song, I said, a memory surfacing through the panic. A place, the conservatory, in the city. She loved the orchid exhibit. She used to take me there, just the two of us. I looked at my siblings. She never took you guys. It was our thing. For a moment, no one spoke. The jealousy, the old childhood rivalries, hung in the humid air, almost as palpable as the danger. The conservatory, David said, typing the word into the keypad. CONSERVATORY. The screen remained blank. The timer continued its countdown. 9:50. No, he said, frustration edging back into his voice. Maybe it's a code word. A name. Her name was Eleanor, Arthur said. Try that. David typed ELEANOR. Nothing. Try Mom, Sarah said with a sad, quiet laugh. Try Mother. He did. Nothing. 8:30. We were running out of time. The air felt thicker, hotter. The beautiful flowers seemed to mock us with their placid, unchanging existence. Elise was walking slowly along the rows of plants, her fingers brushing leaves. She wasn't just happy here, she said, thinking aloud. This was her work, her art. She created life here. She nurtured it. She stopped at a particularly vibrant, strange-looking flower with deep purple, almost black, petals and a brilliant orange stamen. She crossbred this. She was so proud of it. She called it. She trailed off, her eyes going distant. She called it Arthur's pride. Arthur stiffened. What? After me? She said the purple was as deep and stubborn as your temper, and the orange was the bright, fierce heart you tried to hide, Elise said, not looking at him. She moved down the road to a delicate, climbing vine with tiny, star-shaped white flowers. This one she called David's Logic, because it always found a way to climb the trellis in the most efficient, geometric pattern. David blinked, taken aback. Elise pointed to a pot of vibrant, cheerful yellow daisies. Sarah's sunshine. Finally, she came to a plant I knew well, a strong, resilient bush with thorns and beautiful, deep red roses. Elise's spirit, and that one, she said, pointing to a smaller, quieter plant with soft blue flowers, nestled in the shade of the rose bush. That was hers. Eleanor's comfort. She turned to face us, her eyes gleaming. Don't you see? Her world was us. Her joy was us. The key isn't a word. It's a sequence. The order of her children. The order of birth. David said, turning back to the keypad. Arthur, Sarah, David, Elise, RSDE. He typed it in. ASDE. The screen flickered. For a heart-stopping second, I thought it had worked. Then a single word appeared in stark black letters. Error. 6:15. No. Arthur slammed his fist on the marble table. The model house shuddered. We all froze, expecting it to detonate. It didn't. It's not the names, Elise said, her voice desperate now. It's the flowers. The names of the flowers. The names she gave them. She rushed back to the plants, saying the names aloud as she touched them. Arthur's pride. Sarah's sunshine. David's logic. Elise's spirit. The first letters. A P, S, S, D, L, E, S. David tried a P, S, S, D, L, E, S. The keypad beeped angrily. To many characters. Just the first word. I urged. Arthur, Sarah, David, Elise. But it didn't work. The order, Sarah said suddenly, looking up from her bench. Her eyes were focused now, sharp with a memory. It wasn't just the order of birth. It was the order of who needed her the most. The statement hung in the air, brutal and honest. What? Arthur said, his voice dangerously low. She always said it. Sarah continued, her gaze drifting to Arthur. She said Arthur was her first, her biggest challenge. He needed her constant attention, her strength. She looked at me. David was so independent, so logical. He needed her to remind him to feel. Her eyes found mine, and there was no malice in them, only a profound sadness. Elise was her free spirit. She needed her to be a safe harbor. She finally looked down at her own hands. And I needed her to teach me how to be strong. I needed her most of all, and I never even told her. The truth of it was a physical blow. We stood in silence, the timer ticking down to 5 o'clock. So the order, David said. His voice hushed, all arrogance gone. The order of who needed her most. How do we possibly know that? We have to guess, Elise said, her face pale. We have to try. That's 4 factorial possibilities, David said, a mathematician's panic in his eyes. 24 combinations. We have 5 minutes. We don't have time. 4:45. It's not a guess, I said. the pieces clicking together in a terrible, perfect picture. He knows. He watched us. He judged us. He's telling us what he thinks the order is. The key is his perception of our need, his final judgment. The horror of it silenced us. Our Father wasn't just testing our knowledge of our mother. He was forcing us to confront his brutal ranking of our characters, our weaknesses. So who does he think needed her the most? Arthur demanded. Me. The fuck up. Or me? Sarah said. The weak one. It has to be a 4-letter code, David said, his fingers shaking over the keypad. The first letters of our names. A-S-D-E. He wants the sequence. His sequence. 3:30. Try his order of disappointment, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. Arthur first. Always Arthur first. The greatest disappointment. Arthur flinched but didn't argue. Then probably me, I said. The son who followed the money, not the family business. Then Sarah, the daughter who married a man just like me. And Elise last, the one who got away. The one who left and never asked for anything. David typed, a DSC. Error. 3 o'clock. No, maybe Sarah first. David tried SADE. Error. To 45. Elise first. EADS. Error. We were spiraling. The timer was a drumbeat of our impending death. Arthur was pulling at his hair. Sarah was sobbing again, quietly. David was muttering combinations under his breath, typing frantically. 2 o'clock. Elise wasn't looking at the keypad. She was staring at the model house, at the perfect little porch, and then she walked away from the table, toward the back of the greenhouse, toward my mother's favorite spot, a small sitting area arranged around a stone birdbath. Where are you going? Arthur screamed. We have 2 minutes. Elise didn't answer. She was looking at the birdbath. It wasn't stone. On closer inspection, it was ceramic, painted to look like stone, and around its basin, written in my mother's flowing script, was a phrase. The strongest hearts are nurtured, not born. Elise read aloud, and beneath it, carved into the ceramic itself, were 4 names. But they weren't our names. They were the names of the flowers, in a specific order. Arthur's pride was first. Elise's spirit was second. Sarah's sunshine was third. David's logic was last. It was his order, not of who needed her the most, but of who he believed possessed the qualities she valued most. Arthur's strength, Elise's independence, Sarah's warmth, and David's intellect, last unleashed, because he valued it above her heart. The first letters, Elise yelled, running back to the table. A, E, S, D, 1:15. David's fingers flew. ASD. The screen flickered. The word error did not appear. Instead, a new message flashed. The heart remembers. Input confirmation code. The fruit of her spirit. What? What does that mean? David cried, his voice cracking. ASD was right. It accepted it. Now it wants another code. 1 o'clock. The fruit. Arthur said. Wall died. There's fruit trees. Outside. We can't get to them. Not literal fruit. I said, my mind racing, sifting through a lifetime of half-remembered sermons, of my mother's quiet faith. The fruit of the Spirit. It's from the Bible. Galatians. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Which one? David screamed. There's 9. We have seconds. 0:45. It's not 1. Elise said, her voice suddenly clear and certain. She was looking at the birdbath again, at the names of the flowers. It's the fruit of her spirit. Her name was Eleanor, but he never called her that. She looked at me, and I saw the answer in her eyes. I remembered it then. The old, pet name he had for her. The one he'd stopped using after she died. Nellie, we said in unison. 0:30. David typed an ELLIE. 0:25. Nothing happened. 0:24. No. Try Eleanor. Arthur begged. 0:23. It's not her name. Elise shouted, her eyes desperate. The fruit of her spirit. The product of who she was. What did she create? What did she nurture? 0:20. Her eyes locked with mine. And I knew. We all knew. The answer was in the room with us. It was us. 015. David understood. His hands were a blur. He didn't type a word. He typed the first letters of our names, in the order of the flowers, the order of the qualities she had nurtured in us. ASD. 010. He hit enter. 009. The timer stopped. The screen went blank for a terrifying second. Then a single word appeared. Disarmed. A series of clicks echoed from the bomb model. The colorful wires went dark. The dynamite sticks didn't vanish, they just sat there, inert, harmless. The threat was over. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The only sound was the gentle hum of the greenhouse vents and Sarah's ragged, hiccuping breaths. Then Arthur let out a roar that was part relief, part pure, unadulterated rage. He picked up a terracotta pot from a nearby stand and hurled it across the greenhouse. It smashed against the far wall, dirt and shards of pottery exploding outwards. "It'll kill him," he screamed. "I swear to God, when I get out of here, I'll tear him apart with my bare hands." David sank to his knees, his head in his hands, his whole body trembling. Elise leaned against the marble table, her shoulders slumped, spent. I just stood there, watching them. The adrenaline receded, leaving a cold, hollow emptiness. He had made us choose. He had made us see ourselves through his cruel, judging eyes, and then through the slightly kinder, but no less painful, lens of our mother's memory. He had taken her sacred space and turned it into a chamber of psychological torture. A hidden compartment slid open in the base of the marble table with a soft hiss. Inside were 4 small bottles of water and a first aid kit, another of his patronizing, life-preserving rewards. No one moved toward it. The door on the far side of the greenhouse, the one that presumably led back into the main house, clicked unlocked. Arthur was the first to move. He strode to the door and yanked it open, not waiting for the rest of us. He was done with puzzles, done with lessons. He was a bull seeing red. The rest of us followed, to none to do anything else. The corridor beyond was different. It was clean, modern, and warmly lit. The walls were panelled in rich oak, and the floor was covered in a thick, sound-absorbing carpet. It felt like the hallway of a very expensive, very private club. There were doors on either side. Arthur was already trying them. They were all locked. At the end of the hallway was a single, imposing door made of dark wood. Carved into its surface was the Finch family crest, and beneath the crest, a simple brass plaque. The final accounting. Arthur didn't hesitate. He turned the polished brass knob and shoved the door open. The room beyond was my father's study, but not as any of us remembered it. The books were gone. The paintings were gone. The large partner's desk was still there, but it was bare save for a single, sleek monitor. The walls were covered, floor to ceiling, with digital screens, and on every screen, from a dozen different angles, was us. Live footage of us standing in the doorway, footage of us in the library, in the dining room, in the workshop, in the flooding room, in the greenhouse. He had been watching everything, and seated in the high-backed leather chair behind the desk, with his back to us, was a man. The chair slowly swiveled around. It wasn't my father. It was Higgins, the lawyer. He looked pale and uncomfortable. A man in a room he desperately wished to escape. "Where is he?" Arthur snarled, taking a threatening step forward. Higgins held up a placating hand. "Please, Amar. Finch, your father is not here. He passed, as you know, 3 weeks ago." "Then who the hell is doing this?" David demanded, his voice cold. "He is," Higgins said simply. He gestured to the monitor on the desk. "His last will and testament is quite specific and entirely legally binding. I assure you, the game, as he called it, was his final wish, and we are now at its conclusion." "Conclusion," Elise said, her voice weary. "What conclusion?" "We disarmed the bomb. What more does he want?" Higgins tapped a key on a keyboard. The central monitor on the desk flickered to life. It showed a simple, menu-driven interface. At the top it said, "The inheritance final distribution." The puzzles were not merely obstacles, Higgins said. They were evaluations. Each one was designed to test a specific principle Mr. Finch held dear: perseverance, value, preparation, the primacy of family, Your actions, your choices, your successes and failures have all been logged and scored by his system. A series of graphs and percentages appeared on the screen next to our names. I couldn't make out the details from where I stood, but I saw enough. Arthur's bar graph was mostly red, with a sliver of green. David's was half and half. Sarah's was almost non-existent. Mine was mostly green, but spiked with a few deep red lines. Scored. Arthur laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He's grading us from beyond the grave. In a manner of speaking, Higgins said, the system has calculated the distribution of the estate based on your performance. You have a final choice to make. He tapped another key. The screen changed. Choose one. A. Accept the calculated distribution. B. Challenge the judgment. Enter the final arbitration room. Arbitration. I said, what does that mean? It means, Higgins said, avoiding our eyes, that if you believe the system's judgment is unfair, you may appeal it. One of you may enter the arbitration room and make your case. Make our case to who? Sarah asked. Higgins didn't answer. He just gestured to a single, plain, metal door set into the wall between two banks of screens. It looked like the door to a vault. There was no handle on the outside. What's in there? David asked, his lawyer's mind already working. The final arbiter, Higgins said. The process is simple. One person enters. They state their case for why they deserve a greater share. The arbiter's decision is final and binding on all parties. However, he paused, choosing his words carefully. There is a condition. The arbiter's judgment may not be what you expect. It may increase your share. It may decrease it. It may invalidate your claim entirely. There is an element of risk. We all stared at the metal door. It was blank, ominous. This was his final twist, his last piece of psychological gamesmanship. He had us beaten, exhausted, and divided, and now he was offering a chance to appeal to a higher authority, an authority that was, in all likelihood, just another one of his pre-programmed tricks. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a person? A judge? What if we could finally tell our side of the story? It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. We all knew it. But the sight of those graphs, the quantification of our father's disapproval, was a poison in our veins. The chance, however slim, to prove him wrong, to spit in the eye of his posthumous judgment, was a siren's call. Arthur looked at the metal door, then at the graphs on the screen, his own dismal score burning red. His face hardened into a mask of defiant greed. He had already made his decision.